I'm your host, Reena Friedman Watts, and this is the Better Call Daddy Show.
Hey, this is Big Daddy, Wayne Friedman.
That's my grandpa. Grandpa, you ready for more daddy drama?
My dad is my number one hero and number one fan.
And I'm a pretty cool dude.
All right, season 4, baby. Here we go.
More stories you're not going to believe.
And maybe you will after you listen.
5 stars.
5.5 stars, 2 thumbs up.
You are a pretty cool dude.
I love you, Mommy.
Don't stand on the table and damn the public. You'll get some words of wisdom to live by.
Here we go again. Better call Daddy.
You know what your problem is? You like me.
Yeah, I do. Each week, I interview a guest, share the stories with my dad, and then he weighs in at the end of every episode with his wisdom and wit.
Hey, Grandpa.
Everyone from influential players to inspirational fathers, and of course, controversial people.
Grandpa, my mommy's calling.
Creating that legacy one call at a time. And welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show.
Stay tuned.
Where's the music?
Better call Daddy 'cause he knows you best. Better call Daddy 'cause he's bringing the zest. He sees possibilities. Better call Daddy, he'll be by your side. Better call Daddy, you're the apple of his eye. He sees all that you can be, all that you can be.
Do doctors know what's best? Do they care to know what's best? Today's guest, Katya, says in this country, we have the freedom to find out what is our truth. What do we want to do with our health? What has she discovered about endometriosis and boudoir photography? Katya, welcome to the Better Call Daddy Show. I'm so excited to connect with you, Katya. You're the first one that I've actually talked to about what's happening in LA.
Oh, wow.
What is it? What
Yeah.
does it look like? Give me like a real life view of what it looks like.
So it's pretty apocalyptic. I will say this is probably like my 4th natural disaster that I've lived through. So I'm not like alarmist usually because we went through Hurricane Harvey in the South, a series of hurricanes. I was in Boston for snowpocalypse. But this one, it just came out of nowhere. It was like Tuesday, all of a sudden, my husband gets home and he's, "Hey, have you seen the wildfires?" And I was like, "No, usually I can smell it and then I will look it up." And this one, it just spread that. Like it was because we haven't had rain since April, which is also, I think this is the first time since, I probably have to check my facts, but this is the first time since 1960 we've had a drought like this. And I think it sparked, and because if you're familiar with the Santa Ana winds, when they come down from the mountain, it was like gale force winds. So you would walk outside and you felt like you were just being blown away. It was like 70, 80 mile an hour winds. And so the fire, and I think there's a lot of theories now about what started the fire, but it was a combination of drought, no rain, and this fire, and then the winds just took it everywhere. And the winds didn't stop. You could hear the windows rattling, you could hear howling. I don't think I've ever actually seen the Santa Anas be this bad. Usually they're like a local joke. Oh, it's the Santa Anas. But to have it be like this is and I've been reading some literature on, do we consider this a wildfire or is this actually an urban fire? Because that is a lot more like the Chicago fires back in the day, because it's not really just up in the mountains. That's maybe where a little bit of where it started, but up in the footlands where the Palisades are, it just is like the communities grow into the canyons. But the parts that burned, a lot of that was just it decimated neighborhoods. The Pacific Palisades are gone. For me, I corner that neighborhood. So for us, it's been this like push and pull this whole time because we're right on the evacuation border. So It's like where you see on the map it goes Malibu, Palisades, Santa Monica, Brentwood. That's like the area that I'm in. So it's just been a matter of are the winds going to blow it this way or not? And some days they have, and they did issue an evacuation warning, and then they took it back because the winds weren't blowing that hard that day. So I am at a loss for words. I know they have so many theories now, like why wasn't there enough water, and why did the fire department have budget cuts, and why did people lose their home insurance a month before these fires? And I don't know the answer to any of those. I have the same questions, but I don't know that anyone has the answers or truthful answers, honestly. And
It
that's what's
sounds
crazy about it.
devastating. It sounds absolutely terrifying.
It's really been in the pictures, and I'll send you some even from my house. You could see the fire on the other side of San Vicente. I grew up in California with wildfires, but I've never seen anything like this ever. And to spread so fast and to still not be contained, I don't I and just to think about it, like neighborhoods are gone. Like that part of LA is
And it sounds like it's going to take years to rebuild that.
I think it's gonna take probably a decade to get back to some sense of, and I don't even know what that neighborhood's gonna look like. That was a historic neighborhood that had a lot of character, houses from the golden era, 1930s, and those houses are gone, and the fires just move closer and closer every year. That's the scary part. I mean, the Malibu fire of 2018 was one thing. We had some devastating fires, I think 2 years ago, but this one is one of those, like, once in a generation, a natural disaster like this happens. Think, like, top 4 natural disasters in California history.
It's crazy to be there during that time. I just cannot even imagine.
You know what? I am done living through unprecedented times. I would like to live through some precedented times. That's how I feel. It's like,
That's a good quote.
not to make light of it, but like the amount of times I've heard these are unprecedented. I'm like, can we have some precedented times, please? Like I think our generation, and I think you and I are in the same generation. Can we stop hearing that? Like
Yeah.
it's like our nervous systems are shot. Like truly, I think I saw someone say like on Twitter the other day, I if I saw a dragon flying overhead, I would be surprised, but not like surprised. And I think I feel the same way. I think at this point, I'm like, I don't it could be anything.
I don't know why it just honestly reminds me of when I worked at Springer and the more and more of the stories that I kept hearing, I was like, nothing really shocks me anymore. Just how long has it been going on?
Yeah, that's actually how I feel. Nothing really shocks me anymore, and I don't know if that's a good if that's a good coping mechanism or a bad one. I just don't know. I just like at this point I just go into, "Oh, okay, so evacuation bag? Okay, 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 I got it. I'm gonna do that." Yeah, because you just
Can't believe you
through.
can see it from your house.
That's yeah. I just still remember I feel very grateful, obviously, you know, to not have been like myself affected and lost my home because I can't imagine the pain of going through that. But the other thing that I can't believe is how much hate there is on the internet with people being like, California deserved it. Like it's just a bunch of rich a-holes and blah, blah. And it's, yeah, there's some people like that, but there's a lot of just families. Like there's just a lot of families with children who have lost everything. Like it's not all celebrities that live there that have like multiple properties. I don't know where people find hate during this kind of time. I really don't. It's shocking.
It's awful. So Tony introduced us, and he actually told me that you've experienced online hate or IG, Instagram trouble. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed, and I think is really unfortunate, is because Instagram and Meta and whatever, they decided to use AI to monitor all of their content. And AI is designed by a human. It's not perfect by any means, but the thing that I've experienced is, and you can't really see it because of the way that I'm sitting, but I'm curvy. I've been curvy my whole life. I have a fuller bust. My whole platform is around body positivity, especially in an age of Wegovy and Ozempic and people reverting back to thin as in, which I really like hate the idea of body types being like in or out. Like that's your body. Like that can't be in or out of style. That's who you are. Like we can have clothes be in and out of style, but not our bodies. Like that's insane. My platform's always been about like curves, accepting, loving your body. That's something I struggled with for many years growing up in the early 2000s, of course, where that was like very difficult. And I've just always been, I've, regardless of whether I've been thinner or a little heavier, I've always been curvy. And Instagram, the way that it works is they like their algorithm will targets women more so than men. And so it will see like a woman with curves and like a fuller bust and assume that it's like adult. Like I've had pictures flagged of me in jeans and a top for violating community standards because of like adult content. And I don't make
No,
any adult content. I never have, never will. But yes,
you weren't
it
even showing anything like private.
no, no, I
That's
don't ever.
crazy.
And so a lot of what I share is like boudoir shoots because that's been like one of the things that helps me get over and confront my body image issues like really head on. And it will flag a lot of photos that are definitely not showing any nipple at all,
Wow.
not showing any, they might have lingerie, but there's nothing provocative about the pose. In fact, like people always say, like my content is very classy for what it, given that it's boudoir and given the other things that you see on like the Playboy page or the FHM page or whatever. But a lot of like curvy creators experience the same thing. If they just get shadow banned or they'll get completely flagged by Instagram and they'll just literally for weeks not hearing a response to any complaints. Like I even upgraded my to Meta whatever, even though I was already verified as a public figure so I could reach support. And I kept hearing the same thing, delete the content.
Oh my god.
So it's just like this digital discrimination, like plain and simple, because I would see girls posting the same thing, but they were thin and didn't have curves, and that's fine. But like in my body, that's not okay, which is really frustrating because if you're like a body positivity influencer and you're like sharing your story and vulnerability and then literally the platform is telling you that your body's not okay even though you've gone through a whole battle in your head about like your body being okay, that's that's just like it feels like a stab because it's like the platform telling you that you're not okay, like you're not good enough to be or you're not acceptable for being on social media. Like you're not allowed to take up space. And it's crazy because it's not just me. I've heard the same story from so many like curve models. Like even the
Wow.
words curve in people's bios, they were like, take it out, they'll flag it. Take out curve, take out body confidence. That word was shadow banned. That hashtag was shadow
Wow.
banned. The hashtag boudoir is shadow banned.
What is boudoir? What does that mean exactly?
So boudoir photography it's like a style of photography where usually people do like leading up to their wedding and it's like those shoots that are like in lingerie, but they're very like romantic and have the subtle kind of glow about them. They're supposed to be very they're supposed to be very much about celebrating the feminine, very much about empowering the woman and getting her to feel confident in her body. So you can wear anything during a boudoir shoot. If you want to wear jeans or a jersey, that's up to you. It's just really the style of photography to try to capture the natural beauty of the woman or the man. I've seen men do boudoir shoots. It's fun. They can do it, but it's really just a style of photography where they're trying to capture that essence of the femininity and the romance and like the intimacy. And it's usually, I've seen people do them as maternity shoots or post baby shoots when you're just not feeling like you really love your body. If you've gone through something and you're like, I'm not feeling like I love the skin I'm in. And for me, it really helped me see my body from a different perspective and grow my confidence because I didn't realize how much disliking my body was holding me back in life. I didn't realize that. And it's
When
wild.
when did the dislike of your body start happening?
Probably when I was a teenager, probably when I was a teenager. And then it was one of these things that I just shoved deep down inside and didn't deal with it and focused on my career, focused on achieving and was like, if I do this, then it won't matter. Then I can be perfect at something else. And I just ignored it until COVID. And that's when I actually was like, okay, I gotta get therapy. Like I did a whole like 180 of my thought process and my lifestyle and everything. Because I had the time finally to focus on myself,
Okay,
you
I
know?
wanna hear about that, the 180, tell me.
Because COVID, as scary as it was, we finally had time. We were like locked in our houses to do nothing. But don't get me wrong, I still like baked bread and reorganized my pantry. But I also started a workout routine. I had always been an athlete, but I hadn't really focused on making time to work out because I was a corporate executive. I worked like 60 hours a week.
Oh,
Like, I never had time to work out or cook healthy meals. I had completely neglected that. And then during COVID, I was like, "No, I that's it. Like, I'm getting my shit together." And I started, meeting with a therapist about what's the root of this? Like, why do I feel this way? How can I change it? And my husband was really supportive because he was just wanted me to feel confident. And as women, I think it's so hard because the reality is like everything is expected of us. That's the truth as women. It's hard because you're supposed to be a great mom and a great wife and then an all-star at work and then this and then that. And it's like, where does it end? I think sometimes. And then we're always being
all the
told to
time.
it just is, and then we're always being told to like be a boss babe, keep pushing out of your comfort zone. And I'm like, You know what? Can we just find our comfort zone and stay there for a little bit?" I think we've earned the right, frankly. Like we've gone
Yeah.
above and beyond. That's why I think in that Barbie movie, when they did that speech, like that resonated hard because all of us were like, yes, exhausted. Can someone help? And I think for me during COVID was like that time to really change my mindset, change my lifestyle, and then well, understand that I actually like have body dysmorphia to an extent and that it's something I have to be like mindful of. And so that was like when I really turned things around. So when I came back from COVID, like I was way more confident about so many things. Like my personality, the way I showed up for myself changed drastically because it's really weird. I didn't realize how much like this body that you live in, if you are insecure about it, it affects so many things that I didn't realize, like little things, little interactions about what you will and won't put up with, or how you will or won't stand up for yourself. Like, if you feel confident mentally and physically, then you become like your strongest self. And I had never really gotten to that point because I always had this chip on my shoulder about my body that I couldn't, like, it was in the back of my mind, but I hadn't really confronted it because it just seemed too insurmountable to even start thinking about.
Interesting. Did it ever stop you from any opportunities?
I think so. I think so, definitely. I think it really did. I think it affected my confidence in myself, like, just in general. Like, I just didn't feel like in the way that we feel deserving or enough. I think I held myself back without even realizing it
But now
because
look at, like, the work that you've done both on social media and your website. Talk to me about building that and putting yourself out there like.
that was, I think, part of it. That was, I think, part of the journey of I am going to put myself out there and take up space and feel comfortable with that and be vulnerable and do that and recognize that I like deserve to do this. I deserve to pursue something that makes me happy. I I'm gonna go for it. Whereas before, I just didn't think that I just had a lot of limiting beliefs. And I think a lot of them stemmed from how I felt. It's like the story that you tell yourself about yourself. There's the reality of what is your life, and then there's how you talk to yourself. And we often talk to ourselves in a way that we would never talk to someone we love. Like we tear ourselves down. And I was like the queen of doing that. Like I found so many ways to tear myself down. And but the interesting thing is, would I talk that way to a friend that I loved? Never. I would never say that to a close friend. That is horrible. So like why are we so much more unkind to ourselves than we would be to someone we love? It's interesting, but it's really common. Like we're so much harder on ourselves than we are on others. And I don't know why that is, like where that's ingrained in our brain, but it's really freeing to stop doing that. And not to say that it's like you get to a point where you're like, "Oh, I'm healed." It's like an everyday battle, I would say.
Have you kept to a workout routine? Has your body changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think after COVID, I got into the best shape of my life. And the hardest thing actually was when I was diagnosed with endo last year and then went through 4 surgeries in 6 months. That kind of threw me off of everything. So I'm glad I had done a lot of that. It was funny. It almost like I got the answers to making it through the endo stuff right before it happened. So it helped while I was going through it, even though it was like so devastating and I was so helpless. And that's why I'm so passionate about like bringing endo awareness because I hadn't even heard the words till I was diagnosed. I didn't even know what endometriosis was. And that really threw me off of my workout routine. I got so skinny while I was having all these surgeries because I had no appetite. I was like on all these medications. I got super thin and because I was like sickly. I was anemic. I had lost like too much blood through the surgeries. And I was like, some people were like, you look great. And I was like, this isn't a healthy weight for me. Like
Whoa.
for me personally, that I was not I felt dizzy when I would stand up. So for other people, that might be like totally healthy, but for me, like I can't survive like being like a size 6. My body is no.
My body doesn't like to be a size 6 either.
No, my body does not like it. It was like I would get up and I would have these dizzy spells because my body was so malnourished, trying to heal. And it was funny because people would be like, "At least you like got skinny." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I wasn't trying to get skinny. Like this wasn't a goal of mine. Like I was very happy being curvy. Now I'm a lot healthier, but it took a lot of time to get back to some level of health with my body. Like I had to really nourish it back to health with all of these like anti-inflammatory recipes, these like soups that I cooked, and I could like the only thing I could stomach for months because my stomach was sensitive because doctors didn't believe me for so many years. And so they were like, "Well, take Advil." And I had been like taking 4 Advil all the time for years because they told me that like the pain was in my head and I just had PMS and to take Advil. So I was taking so much Advil, I developed like gastritis in my stomach. So I was having trouble holding food down because my stomach lining was so irritated and depleted from how much freaking Advil I'd taken.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
I know that's why I'm like painful. If you have pelvic pain or your periods are really painful or you feel like something's wrong, like women's intuition, if you feel like something is wrong, like I I wish I had pushed it before I felt confident enough to. But I didn't because I think that there's like this underlying doctor patient dynamic that we fall into. They're the expert. What they say I'm fine, I should be fine. Maybe it is all in my head. Like I really convinced myself I think I was crazy at one point. Like maybe I was imagining it. And then to finally have the surgery and the diagnosis, I was like, that was this moment of I knew it. I knew I wasn't crazy. Like I knew that there was something wrong and nobody believed me for I think so. How long did I wait for a diagnosis? Really? I had painful periods from the beginning, so probably like 22 years.
That is crazy. Did you ever talk to your parents about the pain? Did your mom have it? Did she know anything?
Yeah, interestingly enough, after I was diagnosed, that's when my mom was like, turned out she had endometriosis too, but we're from the Soviet Union and she had a complete hysterectomy in her like mid 40s, but they had a different word for it. They didn't know what it was. So she even hadn't put 2 and 2 together that it could be the same thing. Like she was like, "I know I've always had painful periods too. It's going to be okay." So she had all the same symptoms and she ended up having a complete hysterectomy. She thought that it was related to somehow to Chernobyl radiation. She ended up having health issues after Chernobyl radiation with her thyroid. So she assumed that all of her health issues were as a result of that, and I was safe from it.
Crazy.
Crazy. My parents knew. I remember I was like 14 and I was in so much pain when I had my periods. My mom would give me a Vicodin and I would pass out. And that's not normal. A 14-year-old shouldn't be in that much pain. Every ER visit that followed, yeah, they would just come back and be like, "Everything's normal, your results are fine," for years upon years as it got worse and worse.
So it started with period pain.
So when I was younger, it was isolated to really painful periods, and then as I got older, I started having ovulation pain too. And then I started having pain that was like 7 days before my period. And then I started having other symptoms like nausea and vomiting, like that would coincide with the hormone fluctuations. And in addition to that, like I would have like headaches, and then I started having like lower back, really severe lower back pain. And so the symptoms progressed and progressed until I was probably like in pain in one way or another, like half the month. And that's when I was like, no, I'm going to go. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to go get answers. And you have to, push and advocate for yourself in the healthcare system because, and I don't want to say anything this negative, but the reality is they want to treat the symptoms, not the disease. That's the truth. Like they want to give you a prescription, bill your insurance, and get you out of there. So they don't want to find some mystery illness that could be wrong with you. How does that serve them? Like that's the reality of the healthcare industry. Most doctors will, you'll go see them and they'll be like, oh, that's not my specialty. You need to go see a gastroenterologist or an endocrinologist or this doctor. So it creates this maze of how do you actually get treatment? And it's very hard with endometriosis because the symptoms mirror a lot of other diseases. So women will get misdiagnosed with IBS or Crohn's or musculoskeletal things, and they're not getting better because no one is searching for the root cause of all of those symptoms.
So how did you finally get the diagnosis? And did you try going to an OB, endocrinologist, all these doctors that you're mentioning? Did you have to go to
Yeah.
multiple doctors to like finally cross collaborate all the information or whatever?
Yeah, I did. And then I finally found a doctor who out of network, of course. And and that's the other unfortunate thing. I think on all of my endo treatments, almost everything had to be out of network because insurance companies don't have a code for a lot of endometriosis related things. And this is not uncommon. Other women have spent like over 300,000 on endo care. And I think I've spent within a year like over $100,000 just out of pocket on treatments. But I finally found one doctor who was willing to do an exploratory surgery. And lo and behold, the endo was everywhere. Like it was all over my pelvic wall, my ovaries. It had been advancing for years. And my story is unfortunate because that doctor didn't know how to properly treat it. And it ended up with, I kept seeing her until I realized that she just didn't have, there are very few physicians who have the skill necessary to actually excise the lesions and know how to treat it properly. So in my case, I lost the ability to have children. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for that kind of repercussion.
I cannot imagine hearing those words. Oh my God.
I think I've processed it to an extent, but I think it'll always be there that I didn't have the that the choice wasn't mine. But it's hard to say if it would have even been possible with how progressed my endo was, but that's how a lot of women discover they have it is when they can't get pregnant. And then they'll have failed IVF treatments or whatever different things they try. And that's how a lot of women discover that that's the cause of why they can't get pregnant. So it's really that is one of the reasons I I want to raise awareness of it because 1 in 10 women conservatively, so probably more 1 in 7, 1 in 5 have it. Like that's more common than diabetes. And we have no treatments, no cure, and it prevents women from having children. And you lose like a really big part of yourself when that happens. Like whether you were sure you wanted them or not, like you just wanted the choice, or at least I did. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to say to close the door on that.
Was anyone with you when you heard that?
Yeah, my husband was. And it was
How was
had
that for him? Yeah.
he was really supportive. And I think he in his mind was like, we we can build a happy life without this. Like we can there are other things we can do. This isn't the be all end all. We will, there, we are enough. Like, we are more than enough, like, to live a full life. And if we change our minds, we can always adopt, we can figure out something else. There's options. And then I think the biggest thing that he said was like, I didn't marry you for your reproductive organs. And I almost needed him to say that. Nothing's changed on this end. And that helped. But beyond that, and that was that, I feel like that's somehow what I needed to hear because it's such a big part of being a woman, I think. And when you that's taken away, even if you're not sure, like you're like, I don't know. What if I do? My mom had me at 37. Like my sister's had kids like into her 40s. So this was something that I was like, deal with it when I'm ready or more stable or whatever. So for me, instead of I'm gonna give birth to projects, that's how I'm gonna heal from this. Like, I'm gonna do what I can to raise awareness and make it so that other women don't go through what I did. That's my biggest goal. I don't want it shouldn't be happening as commonly as it is. And I feel every week I connect with someone else who's their aunt or their cousin or their sister-in-law or someone in their family has endo. And I'm like, how is it there's this silent health crisis happening and we're not like up in arms about it? And it clearly has some pretty devastating effects for men and women. I think that's like my biggest point is I don't want this to be seen as like a women's issue because it affects men equally in the sense that like they lose that time with their partners. And women with endo who have given birth have actually said that like giving birth was not as bad as some of the periods that they've had of endo and like really severe endo inflammation. Endo, it's not as bad. It wasn't as bad as some of their endo flares.
I actually asked my audience if they had any questions around endo, and a lot of people that I've been connected with came out of the woodworks asking questions. So,
Mm,
what you were saying, unless you go through it, it's never really talked about. So, I want to get to a few of those. This girl, Shayna, who I grew up with, she was like the little sister, somebody that was in my class. She wanted to know what age you were diagnosed because she was diagnosed at 18. And she's curious about the different diagnosed procedures. Has it caused any gastro issues? If so, what were the symptoms? Has it affected weight gain? I know that's a lot right there, but if you can touch
yeah.
on some of that.
Yeah. So weight gain, definitely a big connection. And so I've learned more. This is one thing I'll say. I have been fortunate to learn some from doctors, but the majority of what I've learned has been from other endo warriors, whether I've connected with them on like Reddit, on Instagram, like different communities. The most that I've learned is from like other communities of women. Truly. Like that's where I've actually gotten the truth or facts, I feel like. So weight gain, absolutely, because your hormones are fluctuating in a way that is abnormal. And your estrogen could be elevated and that would be feeding the endo. And so for me also personally, if they try to put you on hormonal birth control to prevent it, I didn't go that route because my body does not tolerate hormonal birth control in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, the first time that I complained of this pain, immediately they were like, and I was in my early 20s, they put me on all kinds of different birth controls. We tried different ones. I gained 50 pounds
Wow.
from just all the different ones. And so there's a definite link there. And so I would not recommend birth control as the route as much as doctors will tell you that's the only way that they've come up with. And that just gets them out of their office faster because they can write you a prescription and send you on their way. There's a big link between your hormones fluctuating throughout your cycle. And so for me, in the days leading up to my period or when I was on my period, I would throw up a lot. So there is a really big link between any kind of gastrointestinal and also depending on where you might have endo, a lot of times it is on the bowel. And so that can lead to pain, like with your, like while you're digesting your food. And it can also lead to constipation, like IBS type symptoms are very linked with endometriosis. And also with your stomach, there's often like you will have an imbalance of the correct bacteria you need. There's something called SIBO that is really common with people who have endo, and it's just like an imbalance of bacteria in your stomach. So that's something to look up. I believe it's SIBO.
And have you figured out ways to lose weight in a healthy way?
Yeah, to some extent, I think for what works for me has been transitioning to a completely anti-inflammatory diet. I don't drink alcohol. It's not fun, but I don't. I haven't for years. But Mediterranean anti-inflammatory diet has been what works for me, and really focusing on foods that will like nourish you. And I'm also gluten intolerant. Whether that's connected, I don't know, but I discovered that like many years ago. But oddly enough, I'm gluten intolerant here in the US, but whenever I have like grains in Europe, I don't react to them.
Well,
So
that
I
tells
don't
you
know.
something about our food.
So I'm not saying anything other than I've noticed a difference.
Interesting. Also, another question, were you passed around the medical community and made to feel crazy?
Oh, absolutely. I felt insane. I actually thought I actually thought I was going crazy. I genuinely did. Like, I think I was passed around the medical community, referred to psychiatrists more times than I can recall, put on antidepressants, definitely. And I really did have moments where I would sit and be like, "Am I am I crazy? Like, am I genuinely imagining this?" Like the amount of times that I was told that it's in my head, like I would be in the ER, hooked up to morphine and told that like it's in my head. And I'm like, how could it be in my head? The gaslighting is very real. And it wasn't until I finally had that diagnosis where I was like, F you. I knew it. Like, I knew it. I knew there was something wrong with me. There's something to be said for women's intuition. There really is. And I'm like ashamed to say that it almost broke me. I really started to think I absolutely was. Maybe I'm just imagining this whole thing, but I wasn't clearly, like very clearly. But that's the common thing is you just you start to feel like I've heard this from other people with endo. They like you fear doctor's appointments because you worry so much that you just won't be believed. It's like a really common way that endo warriors feel because they've been made to feel like they're crazy for their
Look
life.
at the questions that people asked.
Yeah.
It seems like they're experiencing those things too.
Just you're not crazy. If I have one message, you are not crazy. If you feel like something is wrong, trust your intuition. You're not wrong. You're not crazy. None of us are crazy.
I also want to like go back to getting over the fear, like going all in on feeling beautiful, self-care, putting yourself out there, and your husband like being a part of that.
He was really supportive. He would actually go with me to the doctor sometimes because there's so much, I hate to say this, but there is a lot of inherent sexism within our medical community. that he would go with me because he would say, they're not going to say that to me. So I'm coming with you. We would do research on whatever doctor, and he would be like, no, I'm coming with you. Like this way they'll believe you. And you think, was this the 1700s? What era, like, age do we live in? But it really did help having an advocate who was a male. That I cannot believe that in 25 I'm saying that, but it's very real.
That might
I
be
didn't-
another good tip for people. If you're feeling like you're running into the wall, maybe you need to bring, you know,
bring a
bring a
male
friend,
friend.
bring a male
Bring
friend.
Bring a male
Bad.
friend, bring a family member, bring a male anyone. Like I say that I'm not excusing the situation, but if this is what we have to work within, then bring someone that is a male that you trust to advocate for you. We clearly have a lot to do and a lot to fix with the underlying sexism that won't change overnight. So until it does, do this at least to help yourself. That's all I can say. Because otherwise, like, we can sit around being angry about it and it needs to change. And I agree with that, but it won't help a woman tomorrow get care. Like us just sitting here being infuriated about how there's sexism, that won't fix the situation today. So as much as I sit around being like just irate about it, I have to remember that I still have to keep going somehow. And so that's one recommendation. But I'm curious, like, if there's any other questions or what other people are experiencing, if it's the same as what I did, because I've heard a lot of the same stories over and over again.
Let me see what else. Somebody did ask if you had kids or if you wanted them, and did it impact your fertility? She said, asking as someone who had unexplained pain at times in her 20, but unknowingly treated their endo for years through birth control. You talked a little bit about that. Pregnancy and nursing all suppressed estrogen, only to have a rude awakening once her body returned to what she thought was normal.
That's why I don't recommend. My body didn't react well to birth control. And I have a lot of friends now who have been on birth control for a long time and they're getting off of it. And they are having a really hard time. So I think in many ways we don't know, I think, the long-term effects of a lot of birth control and how it affects fertility is my personal opinion, and what I've seen from friends going through it, trying to get off of it, and how it's affected their skin, their hair growth, just all of these different their digestion. If the playing around with hormones is no joke. And I think the way that it's been treated as like a band-aid for so many different things. Oh, you have like skin issues. Here's birth control to the 14-year-old. I think it was really irresponsible. And I think we are seeing the effects of that now, sadly.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious too. You told me that your dad was a professor at Berkeley.
Yeah.
That's really cool because my husband went to Berkeley.
Yes, my dad taught at UC Berkeley. That's how we got the chance to emigrate from Moldova, which is, if anyone's heard of it, it's a real place in Eastern Europe, but not a nice place. It doesn't look like, people always compare it to either, they'll be like, is it like a Hallmark? Is it like one of those Hallmark countries? Or is it like in Princess Diaries? And I'm like, neither. It just looks like a fallen apart Soviet republic. But yeah, Berkeley was great. And I actually lived in Berkeley for a period of time. So I love that campus. It's beautiful.
It really is.
But it was funny for my dad, actually, when he was teaching there, he would see all of like, we had just escaped communism, and he would see all the student rallies that were like pro, that were like Yes, communism, bring it back. And I remember he was like, would come home and be like, kids are crazy. What's going on? Like, he just didn't get it. But he taught, luckily, he taught like math and engineering, and that was his field. But for him, like Berkeley was wild, if you can imagine.
Yeah, it is known for its protests, but how funny that you, like, left that and then saw them protesting for that.
Really, he'd be like, "Oh, what is happening here?" Just so weird. I don't think they understand what they're protesting for. But he was like, I'm not getting involved. Like it was just a very interesting immigration story. But yeah, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and taught there for years. And it's such a beautiful campus, really. If no one's been there, it's just like the redwood trees. It's so peaceful.
Yeah, the redwoods are magnificent. I'm also curious, like, what stuck out to you in switching countries? Do you remember what that was like?
I do remember some of it. I think for me, I was so focused on learning the language because I didn't speak English when I moved here. So I was so focused on learning the language and like somehow fitting in because that's all you care about as a kid, and how to like it was just so different. Like I can't even express the difference. But definitely kids were not always nice in the beginning. This was right after the Cold War. This was mid-90s. So there was definitely like a lot of like Russian spy nonsense, but kids are not nice. So it was just a very different. I don't even know how to explain the difference, but I think the things that stood out to me was the food, just the abundance of food, because that's not something that we had. And going, I think, to, like, Costco for the first time, I remember being like, "Is this place" like, they would give samples back in the day, pre-COVID days, but I think it was, like, an entirely new. I just had to focus on being here and learning American culture because it was so vastly different. There couldn't be a bigger difference, really, between a former Soviet country and America. And especially during the 90s, it was such like a hopeful era. It was very we back then we had precedented times, I think.
Yeah, nice way to throw it back to the beginning of this. It
Yes,
was much
absolutely.
different.
I watch movies now that took place in the 90s and I'm like, oh, how nice. Like back then things just seemed so, like, hopeful in a way, and I remember feeling that. I remember feeling that hope. I was really excited to move to America, start a new life, like, I was on board with doing it. Like, it was very it was definitely difficult to move here and start completely, but I'm glad we got that opportunity because Moldova is one of the few countries that just never really recovered from the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think. Like it's like the poorest, what is it, the least visited and the poorest country in Eastern Europe. It's sad.
Have you ever talked about your parents' upbringing and, like, the difference of their life versus yours?
Yeah, it's been hard actually to get them to open up about certain things. So it's actually taken time for them to share some of those things with me because there was so much that they lived through that was genuinely like very traumatic, I would say, in how they grew up with like food scarcity and also living in fear a lot of the time about whether you were like an informant or just living under the Soviet regime, I think was very in a way that we can't imagine, I think. And that's how they grew up. But I think they generally focus on the positive. They focus on like the natural beauty of Moldova, which it is, like out in the countryside, and they focus on on the kind of those things like Christmases we had out in the country or going to Crimea for the summers, like they will focus on that versus some of the more difficult things that they had to live with because I can tell how much it changed them to go through that. Like the Soviet Union, one of the good things was how much it enforced like academia because they were both really academically minded. My dad is like a genius and my mom is an architect. So they both went to school together. They were married young. So they've been together for over 50 years.
That's beautiful.
Together over 50 years. So they have had quite an adventure, I think. So they do talk about that a little bit, but I think they, for their own sanity, have maybe closed the door on some of the more difficult things I've noticed. Even when I try to
Poke the bear.
try to get some details and they're like, Katya, go eat something. That's their attitude about it.
Do you think
Generally,
their relationship influenced your relationship and who you picked at all?
that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know if it did or not, but I definitely think that I saw things in my parents' marriage that I was like, not for me, not for me. And I actually never thought I would get married. I really like never thought it would happen for me. So it was a fluke. Like I really was resigned to I'm just gonna live life, like focus on my career, do that. And then I met my husband and that was like 10 years ago now. And it just was like whoosh, like we just started hanging out and like never stopped. And that was really it. Like it's a very unexpected, I would say. But I think their relationship definitely informed the way that like I approach things now and like a lot of like challenges that you have to go through as a newlywed, like you learning to be with someone and learning them and all of those things. Like I always wanted to like not repeat my parents' mistakes because they've been together for 50 years, but have they been like a loving 50 years? I don't know. So there's just they hot tempered Russians. I'm much more of a mellow Russian, much more of a mellow California raised Soviet. So I'm not so fiery, but they are like very fiery. I am much more like mellow. But a lot of that's like a common joke. A lot of Soviets are very like they've got a temper on them. But I think luckily I was raised very, very California-esque. I don't know. That maybe led to it.
That's cool. I love that. What's next for you? What's the big dream? What are the projects?
The
You
big dream is I'm writing my first book right now. And I'm so excited about it because I'm actually going to talk about like my endo story and parts of my life, but a big part of it is going to be on endometriosis. I think if we can get to sharing that more, raising awareness, I am going to be starting a foundation actually also to focus on funding research. That is like one of the biggest things. Like endometriosis gets so little research compared to other diseases, chronic illnesses that are maybe like even less common. And I think it's an awareness thing. And I do think that part of it that I want to break through is I think there's this taboo that it is like the women's reproductive system, and not in every country is it okay to talk about that, to talk about women's it's not a period disease, but people will have that misconception. And then in a lot of countries, they don't feel comfortable talking about it because they'll be like, oh, that's women's periods. I don't want to hear about that. And I want to try to find a way to change that and to dispel myths that it is a period disease and that it only affects women and it's not important. The book is number one. I'm working on a documentary also that's going to be really exciting. And I hope it just won't. I felt very alone, I think, when I was going through this because, like I said, I had to find groups online, other women that are going through this and that had gone through this, that had some advice to offer because doctors were not, I would say, prepared and had not been educated to deal with it. And so I want to do whatever I can to change that so that at least like throughout and maybe the way that we did in olden times, like women getting together to share their experiences and remedies and what's worked for them, we can find some kind of answers. Because right now, there's just a lot of questions and a lot of women who are suffering, and that needs to change. Those three things are my biggest goals at the moment. And if anyone is going through it, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help share anything that's worked for me. If it works for someone else, I'm happy. So I hope that this will be relevant for some, for any women that are going through it, just to know you're not crazy and you're not alone. There are so many other people going through this. That's like my big thing because I felt very lonely, very crazy for a long time. And that was, I think, made it a lot harder than it needed to be.
I love your mission. And honestly, I want to ask my dad, does he know anybody that's gone through endometriosis now? I've never covered that topic. It'd be interesting to hear.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for having me and thank you for covering the subject. I feel like it's still one of these things that people don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about. And yet there's a lot of people who are like silently suffering because it's an invisible illness. And you can't tell by looking at someone that they're going through it, but they are. And so I just want to change that somehow because I wouldn't wish what I went through on my worst enemy. I would.
Well, you're an incredible spokesperson for it. And when your book comes out and your documentary comes out, you'll have to come back on.
I will. Thank you so much, truly. I'm losing my voice now because the air quality is garbage. But thank you for having me. I really it means a lot to me. Thank you.
Aw, and let people know what's the best way to reach you. And if you have any resources you want me to include in the show notes, just send me stuff.
I will. Yeah, the best way to reach me is on my social media at .b.karlova. My new website will be up soon. I'm going to try to figure out a way to create like a women's community of endo warriors. So more to come on that soon. I'll try to include something on my website, but if it's someone watching the show and you need help or advice, just email me. I will respond.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. That was so good. Yeah, talk to me about finding out that you could put Botox in other parts of your body.
Yeah, so this is the craziest thing ever, but Botox can be used for so many different things other than fixing your crow's feet or frown lines. But for me personally, the most helpful thing was actually pelvic floor Botox. And they can do that in conjunction with pelvic floor therapy, so physical therapy on your pelvic floor. What a lot of women with endo have is a hypertonic pelvic floor, where it's essentially like your muscles are, think of it as like PTSD. Your nervous systems and your muscles have PTSD. So they clench. They clench and they don't want to unclench because they're so used to being in pain that they can't relax because they don't think it's safe. So what Botox does, the same way for like people who have like migraines or TMJ and Botox helps them, they will inject Botox into certain pelvic muscles. And it's hard. It's very difficult to do. It's ultrasound guided the way that they have to do it. And they're giant needles. So you want to be sedated, or at least I did. And they will put Botox in these core pelvic floor muscles to get them to release. And it's been very helpful for me in terms of like pain management, because that was like one of the few things that no matter how much like physical therapy I did on my pelvic floor, it just, those muscles didn't want to relax. They didn't want to relax and they would continually spasm. And that would lead to a lot of pain, because if you think about it, if you've had other endo surgeries, you either have scar tissue or you have lesions, and that keeps the muscles from functioning the way that they normally should. So, Botox, I had no idea it would be like such a lifesaver, but it really was. And now they could do Daxify, which I think lasts longer than Botox, but Botox worked best for me. It really does make a difference.
Perfect. Wow. On bites. Say that again.
I was just like, I can't believe I've gone around the world for answers, and the answer was Botox. Like Botox, that's what it was all along. I And in the same building where I get my other Botox, unbelievable, unbelievable. On a different floor.
Are you going to have to keep doing it though? Is it
Yeah,
something?
you do. You do have to
Mm,
keep doing it. And the hope, though, is that with time, your muscles and your nervous system starts to relax in the same way that, like, if you continually get Botox, like eventually the muscles will start to calm down and not be so rigid. But when the muscles are like newly traumatized, it does take time. And so you just think about it, it's like PTSD for your muscles. And it could be, and it's not just for women with endo. Actually, if you had a difficult pregnancy, for example, or you have PCOS or a miscarriage, or it could be after birth, pelvic floor Botox can be helpful in those situations too. It's like a whole variety of pelvic conditions that it can treat. It's like it should be advertised more, honestly.
You've heard from my mom. Now, let's switch it over to Grandpa.
I feel like Katya and I had a lot in common.
She definitely has an appreciation for freedom and choice and life. She comes from a very depressed country that broke off from Russia. As she stated, not too many people visit her homeland. And the fight from communism and from totalitarianism, and how she could see people demonstrating in this country where they're clueless to the effect that communism really has on everyday people. People wouldn't be in the streets complaining about America if they knew how the other half lived. Of course, this episode touches a very sensitive spot, because even my own sister, everybody thought she was crazy when she was having all these kinds of problems with her period, and ended up as with the same issues and problems. And doctors are treating it and not even sure all of the ramifications of this disease. And she ended up getting cleaned out. They burnt the hell out of her on her insides, and doesn't even realize that to really get it all out of there can cause a sterilization. I don't know any other word, is that you are now, to feel better, giving up the possibility of having any natural children. And she did this at a very young age and couldn't understand why. It's almost voodoo medicine, where if you're not sure what it is, just burn it all out of there.
And that led you and I to even talk about, do doctors treat symptoms, or are they trying to bring you back in? Do they even care about us anymore? How about lawyers? How about other practitioners?
And they don't even go over all the possibilities of what can go wrong. Okay. And are they just looking to cure symptoms rather than really caring about the person and making sure that they know everything that they're going through? And I don't think that there's many people, doctors, that are aware of all of the different variables when it comes to this disease. And she's trying to get the word out that women who are complaining about this, and it's a high percentage, that they're really suffering and they're really having problems and they're not crazy. And the type of research and the type of caring that's necessary to overcome. Give me the word. Is it
Endometriosis.
endometriosis? Has not really been taken as seriously as it should have been for years. And
I like that she's sharing so vulnerably about all that she experienced and discovered. I think that is very relatable for a lot of women and
well,
people in general.
And that's what's great about the Better Call Daddy show, is that we try very hard to review. Sometimes they're controversial subjects, but some of them are timeless and what people are going through, and where we can all share ideas and communicate with people where they have a place to go, and they can. She's willing to talk to anyone. Send her an email or contact her, and she's there where she's lived through it, so she can sympathize with you and direct you in the right direction to get help physically and mentally, because she's experienced it all. And it's interesting that when people go through certain disasters, just like when you want to do well at something, it's nice to have a good mentor that's won the Super Bowl, helping guide you. Well, it's the same thing when you're facing disasters, is that somebody that's overcome disasters and understands because they've lived through it. Those are also very important mentors to have as well.
Thanks for listening. Now I think I'm going to go call my dad.
I'll say goodbye and see you the next time.
Thanks for listening to the Better Call Daddy show. Join us weekly for new episodes and more daddy wisdom.
Better Call Daddy is good advice always.
And love you, Grandpa, and love you, Mommy.
That's so cute. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. You can also find special episodes on my YouTube channel, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts,
On Good Pods.
Spotify, Amazon Music, Alexa, or your preferred podcatcher. That's a wrap for now.